Hi, I'm Lauren Kemp,
And I'm Bridget Price.
and this is Entrepreneurs in Progress. This week, we are digging deeper into the roller coaster known as entrepreneurship and talking about failure and rejection. So this is a heavier topic, and we thought it would be better to step away from the caffeine and enjoy some delicious cocktails instead as we revisit our glorious failures. So let's start with Bridget. How would you define failure in business?
Well, I think failure for a lot of entrepreneurs can mean different things. I think we've already figured out what failure looks like in life in general. We grew up, F is a failure for tests or grades, C is passing. There's always some type of baseline for being average. But in business, you either make it or you don't. And I think that in our society today, a lot of that resides with being popular or well known or having a crazy amount of money in sales or revenue. And for others, I don't think they realize that for a lot of entrepreneurs, it's just as simple as replacing their income that they've earned from working. So with regard to failure, I think in business, it means not being able to continue to pursue your dream or your venture. That's how I would define failure. But at the same time, as I've gotten deeper into this entrepreneurship lifestyle, I've reassessed if anything is really considered a failure, as long as you go out and try and make an attempt and you learn things along the way, can you really say that you failed? Mm-hmm. I think sometimes with failure as it pertains to entrepreneurs, it's harsh, and people are very quick to throw out a couple of statistics, that the most common statistic, 1 in 5 businesses fail within 2 years. And then 50% of businesses fail within 5 years. And most of the time when we're talking to people about our ventures, for some reason you have one person who knows that statistic like the back of their hand. They are quick to share it. And I just want to know, how come everyone knows that damn statistic so well?
I don't know. I mean, I know it too. And actually, I used to be that person, not like sharing it to other people like who were entrepreneurs, but like me as an entrepreneur, it was kind of like a way to be humble or to be like, I don't expect this to be successful. I'm like, well, I know most businesses fail. So like, it was almost a way of putting myself down and not getting too excited or too hopeful that, oh, like, yeah, this business I'm excited about, but, most businesses fail.
I guess some people use it as again, to protect themselves, a defense mechanism, but it's very depressing when you think about the statistic, right? You have 50% of people who don't make it past year 5. And it's like, whoa, why am I doing this again? And it causes, I think, a lot of people to pause. I would really like to know kind of how that statistic became such a mainstay in our society and how others are quick to kind of regurgitate that fact.
Everybody knows that statistic, and then they're still like angry at people who are very successful in entrepreneurship. It's like,
that
how
is
many
a great point.
People fail, how many businesses like don't make it, and to, bring it back to that defining failure, it's how long can you stay in the game and continue to, be in business? It's tough.
Absolutely. And I would say it's probably even harder for those who have failed within those first 2 years or 5 years and then get back up, dust themselves off, and launch another idea or business. So I don't think enough credit goes to those individuals who have failed and they've figured out to get back out there because this is what they want to do. This is their livelihoods. They've decided that this is the path they're going to embark on. And I would love for other people to learn a different number and find out how many of those failures come back and try again and then are successful the second, third, or fourth time around.
Yeah, that would be very interesting.
Yeah. How about you? How would you define failure?
So it has changed for me, and I know we're going to talk about how our relationship to failure has changed. So initially, it was very black and white for me. It's like it's either successful or it's not. With any like little aspect, I'm talking about like sales and marketing and ops and like all those things instead of viewing it holistically. How's it doing? And so, like I said earlier, now I would define it as how long, can we stay in the game? How long can we continue pursuing this business and supporting ourselves? But before, I was super harsh on myself, and every little mistake that was made or every little thing that didn't turn out well, I considered myself a huge failure, like on a daily basis, which was not great for your mental health.
Right.
And definitely, I'm glad I, went through that process, because I think like I said, I've changed my relationship to failure. I've embraced it as the learning mechanism that it is, and have come out stronger on the other side. So,
yeah, that's great to hear. I mean, I think as entrepreneurs, our relationship to failure does change, right? We kind of come to accept it. But I'm curious, how did the concept of failure weigh into your consideration for pursuing entrepreneurship? Did it create, space for you to kind of hold back?
So I've talked about this thing called the idea high, and I don't really think about failure during that phase when I'm starting out a new business or an idea, because you're so excited about that idea and you think, oh my God, who wouldn't want my product? Who wouldn't want my service? People are going to be like, I got to worry about having too much business. I actually, it was a concern. I was like, what if we grow too fast? And it's like, oh my God, Lauren, you don't even know. That is such a cute thought that you would have that problem. But I think a lot of people think that initially. Yeah. It's like, this idea is brilliant. This business is brilliant. People are going to be knocking down the door for this. And you don't even think that it's going to fail because it's too good to fail. Right. So failure in that sense never held me back from getting started. Now, when I was, going through the business and building and starting the execution side, it hurt me, my psyche mentally a lot more, that it didn't deter me or stop me, because I learned to adapt and learn from those mistakes and keep iterating and trying. I think failure is when you get to that point where there's nothing to iterate or new to try. If you've done everything you can and it's just not working, or if you're doing the same thing over and over and it's not working, if there's nothing new to try, it's kind of over. And that's where, failure kind of stops you at that point.
Yeah, that's a great point about the reiteration. And, I think we're going to talk about pivoting later, but figuring out all your options, exercising them, and then seeing if this is the end of the road, so to speak. I'm a little different. I have allowed fear of failure to stop me on multiple occasions. And it's through various stages. So I think I have great ideas, and then I think about the execution or raising capital or whatever the case may be, and I'm paralyzed with fear. Oh my God, I can't do this. Which is crazy because usually I love a challenge. I'm very competitive. I love to prove people wrong. But there was a significant amount of time, unfortunately, where I was paralyzed by fear and wanted to play it safe. And so it's weird. If I look back, over the last 5-6 years or so, it's almost like I was going to bed every night, hoping somehow my idea or business would just magically take off, and I wouldn't have to do a lot of that grunt work, right? Just the idea itself is going to explode, and I'm going to have people pouring in, and it's not like that, right? It's a lot of no. I'm inspired, and then I have to get to work. And then I think for me personally, I was really afraid of putting in all of this time, effort, and energy for it to be a dud.
Oh, totally.
And I didn't want to risk that, and so for years I played it safe and very miserable and unhappy. And now it's I've shifted my mindset about failure, right? It's about what if I look up and I'm 50, 60 years old and I have not pursued my, what I'm passionate about, or some of these ideas, or at least taking control over my life in the way that entrepreneurship allows you to do. And I realized that is more scary than failing at trying to do something for myself. So that has changed for me, which I'm grateful for.
I think that's a really interesting point too, because I think a lot of people, like we all know and are kind of vaguely aware of that future regret that we're worried about, but it's still not always enough to scare us into taking action and trying, because that paralyzing fear that you feel, I think a lot of people feel that. And even the, the fear of future regret is not enough, because otherwise everyone would be, seizing the day.
Yeah.
And there is something that kind of holds us back. And I think it probably is, that fear of failure and judgment and, self-esteem, all that kind of stuff. But anyways.
Yeah. I would say to that, Lauren, I think that people are so obsessed or, for what it's worth, engaged in the present, that even though they have future regret or concern about future regret, because it's not right there and they're having to face it head on right now in the moment, they push it off and allow whatever fears are happening currently to take hold and prevent them from moving forward. So you're right. I don't think future regret is strong enough for a lot of people to push through.
And I think that's why it would be great for, more entrepreneurs to do therapy to help work through those fears. And I know that we'll touch upon that in a future date, but definitely something, if you're an entrepreneur and you have all those fears and worries, therapy is a good thing to help you get through a lot of the ups and downs of being an entrepreneur. But moving on, Bridget, what does failure look like to you?
So me, I think failure looks like being constantly in the red, not being able to turn over a profit. And honestly, for me to ensure that I don't have to return back to work full time. So if I am not able to make enough money to sustain my cost of living, that's considered failure for me. On a bigger picture, I suppose failure might look like, residing to a life that I don't want to pursue. So at this point, it's working full time in corporate America and not pursuing my current ventures. Who knows what that might look like 10 years from now? But that is what failure currently looks like for me. And it's really about lack of trying, quite honestly, and not, taking that risk. And I know it's different for others. How would you, or what would failure look like for you at this current time?
I mean, failure right now for us is, again, not having enough revenue to not only sustain ourselves, but we do have one full-time employee. And failure to me would be not being able to support that employee. And then that would be devastating for us. And then to not be able to support ourselves, I honestly would feel worse about, failing our employees than I would about failing us.
Right.
As entrepreneurs, it's all on us. And it's we can always go back. And like I said, Brian and I are always of the mentality, we can always go back and try again.
Right.
But letting someone else down would be such a blow. But, failure on smaller scale, less, less grand scheme. It's, not enough revenue. It's not optimizing for your margins. And again, it's all about, how making sure you spend your money wisely so that you have enough to keep going.
Yeah.
But it also looks like partnerships failing and blowing up. It's, getting turned down for funding. It's making those costly mistakes. I think back now, when I was building Cozy Cactus, if I would make a little mistake, I'd be like, oh no, that cost us a couple $100s. And
Right.
I would felt like I'm failing. This is horrible. And now I'm like, oh, those are little mistakes.
Yeah.
The sky is not falling every time you make a mistake, but it certainly felt like that for me at the time. So little mistakes can feel so much more costly and big, especially if you're bootstrapping and you don't have thousands of dollars to invest.
Right.
And then failure can also look like trying different strategies with no success. So with Cozy Cactus, I was like, let's try influencer marketing. Let's try some social ads. Let's try, this and that. And nothing really seemed to gain traction. So I think failure can also look like that. And the last thing is also failure can look like not trusting yourself. And by not trusting yourself, you could end up doing things that hurt your business instead of following your gut instinct, you knowing what your vision is, knowing what is best for your business.
Yeah. I would second all of that. I forget sometimes how many people depend on our business succeeding, right? They have families that they take care of. They rely on the income. And I believe as entrepreneurs, we always find a way, right? If we're having to scrape by or figure out how to pay our bills, we always figure it out, right? And a lot of times, not to say employees don't have that same mindset, but right now, this is all they have, or a large chunk of what they have. And I think entrepreneurs feel a lot of pressure to not let those people down. So I believe that is a good metric of failure to a certain extent. I also agree that in the beginning, when we invested a couple $100 or even a couple $1,000 into something and it didn't work, it was crushing, right? We could have done so much with that money, right?
Yeah.
Then you realize as you get further along, that's, I don't want to say small potatoes, but it's small in the large scheme of things.
Depending on how far you get it,
right.
We are in a good place right now, but back then that felt like a huge amount of money.
And I would also argue and say that when you make those types of mistakes, those financial mistakes, oh my gosh, it holds you back from wanting to do something similar, even if it's the best thing to do. And depending on who you're working with or partnered with, this kind of sometimes this ongoing battle of no, we have to do this. And then you're referencing the last mistake or failure. Like last time we did this type of marketing channel or stream, it didn't go anywhere and we wasted all this money. And we had that experience with Yelp in the beginning. We dumped all this money in and nothing, resulted from it. We kind of reshaped our relationship with Yelp and did a bit more research and figured out what works best for us. And now it's one of our best sources of customers. So it's crazy how, and I was completely turned off on Yelp after we wasted $2,000. Nothing came about. I mean, it was this isn't working. Why would we go back and do it again? But sometimes those mistakes or failures, you have to kind of revisit what you potentially did wrong. And if it's all lost, and I don't think it's always completely lost, you have to get out of that cycle of fear and readjust and pivot. I also try to avoid vanity metrics. For a while, we were so concerned about what our monthly gross revenue was, but then we weren't looking closely at our margins. And we could pull in $100,000 a month, but if our margins are 3%, it's oh my God, what does it matter that we pulled in $100,000? I would rather do $20,000 a month and our margins be 20%, So got to be careful with vanity metrics. And, it's hard not to get caught up because I think that's the world we live in. People are quick to pub, oh my gosh, I just grossed $1 million, for the year. Let's really dig into those numbers. Let's peel back the layers. I'm all for celebrating successes because getting to $1 million is amazing, right? But not falling into the traps of those big, fancy, glittery numbers and not knowing exactly what someone is taking home. So I hate vanity metrics for that reason.
I think growth is another one, percentage growth is another big vanity metric. Brian and I like to joke, we grew our company by 50%. And when we're making, when we made just a small amount of money in the beginning, we doubled our revenue, we've tripled our revenue. It doesn't mean shit.
I know.
It's just fun to joke about because we know it's such a joke.
Year over year growth by 717%.
Right. It's when you make $100 in 1 month,
exactly.
I hope you grow by more. Right.
It's insane because so many people lead with that, right? And you're like, what the hell am I doing wrong? You know? But you're right. If they only made $1 and then next month they made $1,000, like I grew up by 1,000%. It's insane. So
I think this actually segues nicely into accountability. So, you know, how honest are you with others about your failures, and do you take accountability for them?
I am a person who is completely an internal locus of control person. So for me, I have to take control or accountability of failures or else they won't get fixed. And that's just how I've always operated. If I believe that it was someone else's fault or someone else's wrongdoing, it really prevents you from digging in and assessing what can be done differently. And so I love to take that accountability and control because I want to fix my own problem. I don't want to be the source of my failure, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And while there can be external forces, we know that for a lot of people, unfortunately, last year, COVID-19 came in like a wrecking ball and destroyed a lot of small businesses. Those, I think, are exceptions, you know, where you have to take into account there are forces outside of your control that you couldn't foresee and unfortunately couldn't plan for, like a pandemic. So
Yeah.
outside
Black
of
swan
that,
events.
yeah, those are different. I think those expose other issues within small businesses and the support that they don't get often. But, you know, with regard to individual failures or on a personal level, I take accountability for sure. It can be rough on my mental health, right? It can take a toll sometimes, but I get the furthest along when I internalize that failure and try to dig myself out of it.
And what does, you know, that holding yourself accountable look like? Like, I know with you and Marcus, like, is it apologizing? Is it vocalizing and acknowledging it? Is it something that you self-realize and you don't like tell people? Like, how much do you tell people?
Yeah, it depends on what mood I'm in. You know, if I'm not, you know, completely just berating myself and calling myself an idiot, when I get past that stage, you know, I either apologize for the mistake, I own it. Sometimes it's difficult when you're working with a partner. You know, you want to avoid the I told you so's type of conversation. You want to be considerate of someone's feelings and how they're also reacting to a failure as well. So it's really about talking about what went wrong. And sometimes I've learned when a problem arises, you can't address it right then and there. You have to let it sit and let your temper, you know, adjust, because it can be very emotional. If it's a costly expense or failure, if it's a relationship failure, you know, partnered with somebody and it didn't work out, all of it can take a toll and be a blow. And so it's important to kind of, you know, wait a second before digging into what went wrong. A lot of, you know, I take this from the corporate world, you know, a lot of the past failures, we kind of do like a debriefing, like what happened, what went wrong, what are we going to do, and how we're going to move forward. So I would say that the good thing out of all of that is we do come out stronger on the other side. We figure it out. If we fail a customer or someone, we always apologize. We make it right. And then we develop a process or pivot and make sure it doesn't happen again. So does that look the same for you, or?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that taking accountability is so important as an entrepreneur because, you know, and Brian has shared this view that like he is responsible for Rotive. It's the, you know, extreme ownership. It's about how like if I mess up, that's Brian still's like, that's still my fault. Like I hired you, you know, I chose to work with you. Doesn't happen. Yeah. I'm kidding. Brian's probably rolling his eyes during this whole section. But that's the idea that, you know, everything when you're an entrepreneur around your business is your fault. Like, but also your success because, you know, and I mean, it's a team success, but
Right.
The idea is that when it comes to accountability, like you run the ship. You make the
Right.
decisions. Every decision you approve or, reject, every person you hire, don't hire, like the strategies you decide to take, that is all on you. And it's
Right.
a very daunting thought, but it's also, that's just kind of how it is. You're running the business. You are responsible for the success or failure of that business, and you can't go blaming
Right.
other people for that. And, pandemic and stuff, those big unforeseen events, that's a little different.
Sure.
And especially with clients, like how you mentioned, like, always apologize. That's huge, I think, with clients. If you're, in a service customer facing, business,
Yep.
we apologize. Like, we own up to our mistakes. If like I messed up somewhere, I say my apologies, like
Right.
first thing when I respond to someone, because I just from my perspective, I would like that from a person I was working with, to have that accountability and be like, hey, you know what? I messed up. Here's what I'm doing to fix that, and try and go above and beyond to
Sure.
make the situation better. And I think because we do that, people are a little bit more okay when we make small mistakes. Like
Absolutely.
if we make a small mistake, but we're like, I'm so sorry, like we fixed it, and it was taken care of immediately, and we're try and even do a little bit more and help out and fix something in their org, which doesn't happen that often. So if anyone's listening, like
Right.
let me just say, mistakes don't happen often. When they do, they're small. And when they do, we
Right.
take accountability and we fix it as soon as possible, and we make the situation better. And I think that's just good customer service. So
Yeah.
I think acknowledging
absolutely.
it with customers, acknowledging it with your partner, vocalizing it, acknowledging it with friends and family too. Like,
Yep.
I think
Yeah.
that when we're sharing, about our business with friends and family, many people want to come off as successful and doing great. And sometimes if you're just positive all the time, it comes off a little inauthentic. And
Right.
because, not everything is perfect, and you don't want to you don't want to be too negative. You don't want to be inauthentically positive. I think we want to try and strike
Right.
that balance where if we say something's doing really well, people believe and think, oh, they must be doing well, because I've heard the times that they said things are not going well.
Right. Yeah. I would agree with that. I think that Marcus is the same way as Brian. Any failure on any fronts, he takes it on 100%. If I feel like I've fallen short or failed, he's like, nope, it's on me. It's that type of thing. And I think that's important for business owners to have, entrepreneurs to have, because again, you're quick to fix it. You're quick to write it. You're quick to address it. I honestly don't think, maybe I might be speaking prematurely. It's hard for me to imagine successful entrepreneurs not having that mindset, not being able to take a full accountability for issues that come up. And so I wonder if that's a personality trait that's found commonly amongst entrepreneurs. I wonder if that's potentially a reason why certain partnerships fail. If you are partnered with someone who refuses to take accountability, you can't ultimately work with that person. I've seen it firsthand, not necessarily working with anyone particularly, but I've seen it firsthand in some of the small companies I worked for where that accountability is lacking, and it creates quite a mess. So I think it's also important to be honest about your failures. Like you said, we own any issues with our customers outright. We're very client service first. So how do we leave you feeling when we do a great job, when we do an not so great job? What does that look like? And again, I think you're right. A lot of people are willing to overlook small issues. They understand that we're human too. For me personally, I love to lean into we're a small business. It changes the narrative a little bit from if we're some franchise or big corporation where they're not so forgiving sometimes. But yeah, I think being honest allows you to, being honest with others allows you to really be honest with yourself too. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
Switching topics a bit. How do you know when to pivot or change direction on, an idea, a strategy, or your whole business?
I think that when you're first starting out, you're forced to pivot. You're first forced to pivot early on because a lot of ideas do not work or are executed in the way that you had hoped or imagined they would be. So I think you have to be more flexible, and you have to be open to making those changes. When you're in a different part or stage of your business, sometimes it can be harder to pivot because maybe something has been working out so well and now things are changing. I think for a lot of companies, they were forced to pivot when COVID-19 hit and figure out exactly what can we do differently. A lot of companies in our industry had a 40-50% drop in business through the months of April and May. And we leaned into that, and we were like, this is actually a great time for us to really look at our numbers, take this down period, and when things are up and running again, just go really hard at it. And so I love when there are things that happen naturally that causes you to pivot and reassess things. In other instances, I'll tell you one specifically. With our cleaning business, we are getting a lot of vacation rental guests, clients, and things like that. And that was super exciting. But because of the nature of the industry with vacation rentals, they expected quick turnover service, same day cleanings, and somewhat more demanding than a traditional routine or standard cleaning, right? There's a lot of moving parts. And so we were kind of up to our ears in vacation rental cleanings and trying to make it work, at least price-wise, that we failed on that front. We were losing so much money on those cleanings or those types of services because, traveling came to kind of a halt. We had to go ahead and shift and make adjustments for how we were going to pursue vacation rental cleanings moving forward. So we were able to develop a whole new process, make it more efficient, more appealing for our professional cleaners to do versus, losing money on the front end. And it's been a night and day difference. We were able to kind of pick or choose the clients that we wanted for vacation rentals. If they didn't agree to a certain price or the way that we handle our turns, then we just didn't work with them, and it was fine, right? No hard feelings. But it felt better to do that than to take something on knowing we were losing money. And
that's hard to do as a business, to turn away clients. Like when you're starting out, it's very hard.
Yeah, I'm very much like, let's take it on. We'll figure it out. We'll develop a process around it, that type of thing. But let's not turn this business down, right?
Yeah.
But that can lead to creating a monster bigger than you've ever imagined and growing at a rate that you can't control. And that's what was happening with us. And so we wanted to take control back again and not have the needs or demand control how we operated our business. And so I think it's funny. I have to be honest. We were always talking about how we were going to pivot, knowing we knew this was a sore spot for us. But we were growing so fast that we were almost lying to ourselves about how we're going to implement certain changes. And I'm not 100% convinced that, again, looking back in hindsight, that without COVID-19, we would have been able to do that hard stop and say, we're going to fix this first before, moving forward with new vacation rental clients. So I'm grateful for that, because even listening to me share that piece of information, it's making me more keenly aware of the importance of, attacking an issue head on versus waiting for some downtime to take place.
Yeah, there's no downtime.
No. Good thing, right? Technically, you're growing and you're experiencing, spurts, and you're trying to scale the business. So But yeah, I think you gotta be honest with yourself when you need to pivot and how that takes place, and maybe even develop some type of, Marcus loves processes. So developing a
Yes.
process around pivoting, right? Like what does that look like, and identifying that. So
I also
yeah.
laugh every time if you see me smile like while you're saying the word pivot. It's not like, it's because I think of Ross from Friends yelling pivot with the couch, so I'm not
Yes.
trying to be disrespectful.
Yeah.
But
No,
yeah,
that's
pivot.
hilarious.
Yeah, so we had a similar type of situation where we had to pivot on a product. So we're a services-based business, and Brian had come up with the idea. Well, actually, I think it wasn't Brian. I think it was one of our previous partners who actually thought about this. He came up with the idea of, well, what if they had a like monthly membership, so that way you could have people on subscriptions. So a monthly support membership where they get, an extra couple hours of consulting, and it was low cost, but it was something that they had in case they had issues. And the feedback we got all around was, this is a good idea. People will like this. And Brian started pitching it to prospects, and he would, this is where the iteration comes. He would change and try to figure out, what if I position it this way? He would change the phrasing in his pitches. And we just found that despite us thinking it's a good idea, and despite changing how it was pitched and how we positioned it, customers were still not that into it. And so we ended up having to like sunset and get rid of that idea. And we're just kind of like, wow, I thought that would really work. We really tried, and it didn't. And it ended up changing into what we have now, which is called our managed services.
Okay.
So instead of like a support membership, it's managed services. And I think we've been able to position that better, because it's not just support, it's admin work. It's, we listed out all these, things that we could do as part of this package. And just by pivoting and changing kind of what the essence of the, the product is, I think that is, it's starting to resonate more with some of the clients that want to continue to work with us. We had this product that failed, like people didn't want it.
Right.
We pivoted, we learned. It took us like maybe almost a year, maybe 9 months, 10 months from when we had that initial like membership idea, and then it evolved into managed services many months later, because we took that feedback and we're like, okay, let's learn from this. And I think that's another thing about failure. Failure is feedback. If people think they're not getting enough feedback on how to adjust their services or adjust their product, that is feedback. No feedback is actually feedback, because that's feedback that it's not resonating and that something needs to change.
Yeah. No, that's absolutely right. And I love that despite the reiterations that Brian made to the service, it still still wasn't a fit. But then you both were able to develop something that turned out to be exactly what you're looking for. It just took a little bit longer. And I think that that's important to capture. When you pivot, it's not always super quick, right? You do pivot, but sometimes you're holding the ball a little bit longer to figure out, which direction to go. And sometimes a pivot is literally a step back. And that's what we did with our vacation rental customers. We kept kind of our existing book of customers, but then we refused any more until we got this right. And that, I think, is super important to do, and super important to keep in mind when you're trying to grow your business and manage quote unquote failure. I love that you said failure is feedback, because we send out questionnaires after each cleaning to see how our teams did and all of that, but we also get feedback from our employees. And we send, we do biannual surveys to figure out exactly what they're not happy with, how we can improve things, how we can also make sure that we are people that we'd want to work for. And I think failure is, there's multiple parts to failure. There's failure on the number side, not making enough money, not making enough sales, or being able to pay people. But there's also failure in terms of the culture you create at your company and how you take care of your employees. And so that's always been important for us. We are different in that sense when it comes to traditional cleaning companies. We pay really high end, and we listen. If someone is saying that they're not happy with the route or they're not happy with something, we really internalize that and we listen and we make adjustments. So I think, entrepreneurs have to also consider who they're working with and making sure that they're not failing their partner, their customers, or themselves. And it's a multifaceted situation.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've talked about pivoting on an idea or product. How do you know when to just give up on a product, on a business, on an idea, and move on, cut your losses?
That's hard. I think for a lot of entrepreneurs, they love their ideas, or they even love the services that they were providing, and they realize it just isn't working. I think that for me, it's not really, the example I have is not really an idea, but just a situation. So we're one of the few cleaning companies that was operating 7 days a week. So we'd have cleaners out Monday through Sunday. Turns out a lot of people don't like to work on Sunday. So, we went from asking certain employees to be available on those days to then just reserving them for vacation rental cleanings, because a lot of people check out that day and we can usually get someone in there, to now really being like, okay, let's look at our numbers. Does it make sense financially to operate on Sundays? And we found out it didn't. A bulk of our sales wasn't coming from that particular day. And arguably, what we were netting each month, Sunday did not make or break that per se. So it's like, let's reduce the stress of trying to staff jobs and pull teeth to get people to work on a day that they don't want to work. And so I think really when you give up on an idea or any type of aspect of your business that isn't working, you really just have to pour into the data. When you pour into the data, when you extract it and analyze it and take a look at it, the answer will be right in front of you. And I think that entrepreneurs have to be able to compartmentalize. They have to be able to, for what it's worth, put their feelings to the side of what they think is best and think about it from a business operations perspective and what makes the most sense.
That's a great point, because what we think is best and that clients we get the most value of is not always what the customer thinks that is best and wants. It's all about, what does the market currently want? And it may not be your idea at that time.
Right. At least that version of your idea, right? So
yeah. I think another indication when it's time to move on, if it's like, you're in the beginning stages, because let's say you haven't made it to that point, is if you can't iterate anymore. Like you've tried and you've iterated and you've done all you can, like you could potentially put something on hold and maybe revisit it later. But if you're doing the same thing over and over and you're not getting anywhere, definitely a time to move on. If you're trying everything and nothing is working and you've exhausted all ideas and you're just missing something, might be a time to put on hold and move on. You got to take the feedback that you're getting from people.
Right. What do you think about giving up on an idea after all those iterations? And let's say some of them were successful and you've been able to make it work, but now you are feeling so burnt out, so exhausted, and now you're questioning whether or not this is something you want to pursue. Is that considered failure to you?
I think it used to. I think it absolutely used to. And I felt like, I got to get right on the first try. And if not, I'm this big failure. And I've kind of gotten used to the idea. Well, it's like, okay, you can put something on hold and revisit it. Maybe it will never revisit it. Like, The way at least I like to see it is like, if there's an idea that I really love and it's just not working out, I will shelve it. I will always give myself the option to come back to it later. It takes a lot to fully, I think, because as entrepreneurs, we're so like tied to those ideas.
Yeah.
It takes a lot to fully let go and just be like, okay, this isn't working. At least for me, like maybe not so much for like Brian and Marcus, who have a million ideas and they move on quickly, which is also great. But for me, it's a lot more personal, and I have a harder time letting go.
I feel like even for people like Marcus and Brian, that there's a threshold, right? There's a breaking point where it's like, oh my gosh, like Charlotte from Sex and the City, I've been looking for him forever. Where is he? Like, where is this idea that will allow me to enjoy the fruits of my labor and not have me launch into something else yet again in hopes of whatever I'm pursuing? And I think that sometimes older entrepreneurs feel like they are concerned about getting to that point, that breaking point where it's like, ugh, do I just hang up the towel and throw in the hat and pursue something full time? So I think that's a constant fear of that. But, depending on where they are, they will continue to push through.
And I think you can also tell when to stop is if you don't care about the idea anymore. Right. I think that, you can tell when you're not as passionate about it. You have, that initial excitement and you work really hard in the beginning, and then, inevitably you'll hit a point where it's not going, as far as fast as you would like, and it's starting to become a grind, and motivation is always going to increase and decrease over time. But you can tell when there's an idea where, like, even within all the ups and downs, like, you still want to stick with it. You can tell when you don't. You can tell when Absolutely. You're like, you know what? I don't love this idea that much. Like, it's not worth all my time and energy. I'm moving on to the next thing that I'm more excited about.
Have you experienced that? Because I am kind of in the throes of that now and have been for a couple of years, where you launch into a business or idea and it's not what you thought it would be. And now you find yourself becoming detached from it.
So again, I'm more new to this. Like, you and Marcus have been doing this for a lot longer than I have. Brian has as well too. So I've only had, bless you, I've only had like, Cozy Cactus is really the only like main thing. I was like, I love this idea. This is the one that I don't want to, give up on, but am putting off to the side in the meantime while Rotive is growing. And I know I have a lot more to learn. I know the direction I want to take it, and I know it's going to take a lot of investment money-wise, which we do not want to do right now. So I'm like, okay, I'll revisit. But when I think back to like the list of ideas of things that I haven't tried, I don't know. It's hard. I think I see it more in Brian, where he can tell when he's no longer passionate about a specific idea, because he has so many that he just like, it's hard for him to necessarily stick to some of them. And which is a good thing, because he's like, okay, this is not working out, and he's excited about something else, then I'll move on. For me, I haven't quite had that experience because, I love my idea. My one idea that I actually, the one idea I actually decided to pursue. I really love it. And maybe it'll turn into something else in the future, but, or maybe I'll have another idea in the future. I actually have a couple ideas that I'd like to pursue, but I don't know. But I haven't had as much of that feeling yet, probably because I'm, so busy with Rotive, and I still love my first idea. And this could be a different answer, a couple years from now.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder how many entrepreneurs stay in the thick of things because it's taken off or it's pretty successful, but they no longer feel the passion for it. And I think passion and entrepreneurship is another conversation we need to have. I would arguably say, knowing what I know now, it's not always the best idea to make your passion your true business venture or idea. I used to believe that when I was younger, but they're really two different things, right? It's really about setting up a foundation for you to pursue all your life streams and stuff like that. So that's a conversation for later. But, I believe as we grow and evolve as people, I can imagine that it's hard to just be like, this is it for the rest of my life, and this is the business I want to be in. And I wonder how many people feel stuck despite the success that they experience. You know,
Well, we would have to ask someone who
I know.
made it.
Well, I feel that because a lot of the businesses that we've started out in or built, I can't imagine doing them exactly right now. And even with, you know, like I said, you know, previous episodes, I've been very honest, like just the residential cleaning business is not something I would arguably say I'm like super passionate about, right? But I think it's created this foundation for me to really see all the possibilities and understanding the nuances of business and what it means to be profitable and everything like that. So it gives me more courage to pursue other ideas and ventures.
And it's a learning experience. Like, even if it's not your passion, but it's doing well, like, you're still going to be learning, you know, a lot, so that the next time you pursue an idea, you're more likely to succeed because of all the lessons you've learned in this previous one that is working.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's why so many entrepreneurs have failed at businesses and then were able to do something successful and figure it out. So I can say that what I noticed with Marcus specifically is he invested so much time and energy up front. He would scope out an idea, execute it, do everything to the, you know, tooth and nail, and then expect $1 million in 2 weeks. When that didn't happen, he was completely floored and disappointed and did not understand. I just spent 6 months of my life building this thing. And what do you mean it's not successful in 2 weeks? And this is the first time with the cleaning service, he decided not to do that. And I had a conversation with him. I said, listen, like, I see all the work that you put in, the late nights of sweat. I said, you have to go beyond 2 weeks. You just fight through that, you know? And he did. He finally let that wall down and was like, you know what? I'm going to be a pupil. I'm going to study. And it's paid off. And again, I find that the most successful people study other people. You know, because I think a lot of people learn from other people's past failures as well. I don't think we've touched on that. And I think it's important to share those failures because I don't think, especially in the world of entrepreneurship, I don't think we need to hold everything close to our chest. I think we need to be more open about things. I think we do need to shift the conversation around what it means to be quote unquote successful. And so other people don't feel so alone out there. It's very hard to hear all these vanity metrics, the grew by 1,000% numbers without having the full context. And so I think it's important to share all aspects of that and learn and apply those past failures from other people in other industries. And I think it'll help people ultimately find a success that they're looking for.
Well said. So the final topic around failure and rejection that I'd like to touch upon is mental health and how it, you know, personally affects us. What does rejection and failure feel like to you, and how do you cope with it? How do you handle it? How do you push through and overcome it?
Man, so I typically have a small pity party, you know, where it involves copious amounts of wine and chocolate or something of the sort. It sucks, right? Rejection is very hard to digest sometimes. For me, what I did ultimately was continue to put my head down and move forward. I never really acknowledged rejection. You know, I'll have my moment where I'm drinking my wine, my bottle of wine, but then it's always inward. So I don't always share that rejection publicly. So I keep it moving, keep it pushing, and I figure out another way to adjust. And I have figured out how to build that wall where I'm leaning more into it's always business and not personal. So because we hold our ideas so true to our so close to our chest, and it feels like a representation of us, it's easy to feel rejected when someone does not like your idea or doesn't support it. And what I've done is try to separate who I am as Bridget from the idea and acknowledge if they don't like it, they don't like it. And it has nothing to do with you. Maybe it has something to do with them, or maybe it's in between and you just have to figure out how to effectively communicate your idea, your business. So I don't take any of that personally anymore. It took a really, really long time, but I feel stronger as an entrepreneur by building that wall in between, that personal and business type of relationship that lives within my mind. I feel like rejection is just part of the process, right? It's going to happen and you just got to figure it out and keep it moving. You have to expect it, I think.
Mm-hmm. Rejection and failure is inevitable. Yeah. And I think that you brought up some really good points about how it feels so personal. When you're starting a business and putting yourself out there, it feels like you are putting a piece of yourself out there for people to judge. And
Yep.
Rejection really hurts because you're like, this is a piece, like you're rejecting not my business. It feels like you're rejecting me. It feels like you're telling me I'm not good enough. And that is so tough to take as an entrepreneur. And for me, I go through anxiety and depression, which definitely makes it not easier because there's so many ups and downs. I was like, why am I doing this to myself?
Right.
So it's really tough to navigate that. And I mentioned it earlier, like, I think one of the best ways to deal with a lot of that is to, go to therapy, to have someone to talk to about how you feel about all of, the ups and the downs and the stressful parts, and be able to work through that. And that's how you're also able to separate it a bit. And I think, it's like you said, you got to put your head down and keep trying. And I think you do build up that resiliency. Like, it's a muscle. And, you fail the first time and it hurts like hell. And then you fail again and it still hurts. But by the time you keep doing it, it doesn't hurt as much. And you get a bit better at dealing with it. And you don't feel like the sky is falling every time you make a little mistake. And you build up that resiliency muscle. And it's hard to get to that point. It took me a really long time to be okay with that. I think I was, telling Brian, you were talking about, to bring it full circle, we were talking about that statistic about how most businesses fail. Yeah. And he said, I told you that when you were starting Cozy Cactus, and you were not very receptive to that. You didn't find that supportive. I'm like, how am I supposed to find that supportive? You're saying that most businesses fail and that I'm going to fail and I'm a failure. And I'm like, and now I get it. It's like, okay, it's...
I do think people say that out of concern. I do think that people are trying their best to be there for you the best way they don't know how. And even to you not being receptive to that, I think you can't be receptive to that, if that makes sense. Like, you cannot be receptive to that information off the bat because you won't do it.
Because you'll give up. Why try? Like, the statistics are not in your favor.
It's the same thing with professional sports. Like, people are so quick to say, oh, you have a better chance of winning the lottery than to be a professional athlete. And it's like, I mean, I'm still going to try. Like, I understand the idea of managing expectations. I get that concept. But when people are already in the throes of it, and listen, I've got my website up, I've got my product, I've got my packaging. Now you're telling me I'm going to fail?
Well, I think too, from Brian's perspective, he was trying to tell me it's okay if it doesn't work out. Like, don't put all your like hopes and dreams on this one thing. I think he was trying to convey it's okay, but I was hearing you're gonna fail. Right. So like,
that's a great point though. I think that people need to figure out how to throw out that number and that statistic, and they need to figure out how to frame it better.
Entrepreneurs, I think, already have a lot of, depends on who they are. So I won't use broad strokes, but there are some entrepreneurs who they already are hard enough on themselves. We want to try to support and encourage because it is really hard.
Yeah. As soon as I got into the execution of an idea or a business, it's never been lost on me how hard it is. It's not lost on me on the many failures I've had and mistakes I've made. So I don't need an outsider, re-emphasizing that. I already know that. So that support is super important.
And I think to end, I just want to tell entrepreneurs that it does get easier. Like, I feel like a cliche, like PSA, but that you do build up that resilience. You won't always feel like you're failing and you're a failure. I mean, you gotta, you do have to change your relationship to failure, but if you work at it, it will happen. You do get that bounce back, that resiliency, that perseverance.
I would also add that failure is a part of the process. Mm-hmm. And I believe entrepreneurs know that. We may not always understand the gravity of those failures or how or what form they will take, but it is a part of the process and you have to fight through. And it does get easier. Your brain will become immensely sharp with navigating these failures and pivoting and moving in a different direction. You can't operate or be successful any other way. No business ever has gone on without experiencing their fair share of failures and, having to step back and reassess what they're doing. And as long as you are persistent and consistent, you'll be okay.
Thanks for listening. Again, like, subscribe, share, all the things, and stay tuned for next week.
All right. See you guys later. Talk to you soon, Lauren.
Bye.
Bye.